let's get into everything to do with growing margin on Amazon and consumer brands in general, the e-com space actually in general. So, but obviously primarily focused around Amazon. My name is Jassim East. I'm the CEO and founder of Voadera. We've sold hundreds of millions of dollars on online marketplaces, primarily Amazon. Last year did around $90 million with a team of 150 great people. And we have a lot of experience dealing with margin and squeezes, and especially in today's economy, and I'll get into that a little bit. But basically last year a big initiative of ours with everything changing, the tariffs, all the extra costs, the squeeze happening, even some a little bit to do with inflation, whether it's on our labor side of things or supplies. So we had a big initiative of saving on costs. We made supply chain a big focus of it, but even overall we just looked at everywhere, and that's what I'm going to jump into this presentation and how we saved costs across the board. Even our business model in general, the primary concept of it is basically that we'll partner with brands and we'll make them as much, if not more, than what they're making from Amazon as net proceeds currently. So we're not charging them a retainer. We have to basically make the margin on each unit sold. So they'll still get the same net proceeds, but we're also now in the middle, and we also get a portion of that while also growing their brand. So we have to make sure that we're every penny counts. We have to squeeze as much as we can because that's how our business model operates. So we have to be very, very diligent about every single one. So you can see what we've done for our partners in the past. This is one of the videos that I actually made to inspire this presentation where I would go much more in depth here. You can feel free to check that out. I'll probably put something at the end or in the description. So what we'll go over in today's presentation, basically going to go over margin high level, why everything starts with data, cost levers that impact margin, revenue levers that impact margin, right? And Amazon fee mitigation, so Amazon fees that you can avoid, some best practices to keep in mind, and actually a bonus at the end that's fairly tactical that we don't see a lot of people use, that actually moves the needle fairly significantly. So why margin specifically today? Why is it more relevant than ever? There's a few things going on, right? So a lot of companies have reached the maturity stage where they're making a lot of money, right? This is going to be focused on Amazon. They started in, I think, 1998, I believe, 1999. They only started turning profitable in the early 2010s. Yes, they made some money early 2000s, but truthfully, early 2010s and even up to last year, I mean 2015, 9 years ago, they only made $500 million only. I mean, that's a huge number. But anyways, I mean, compared to what they're making last year, they made 60 billion. So you can see that right now, Jeff Bezos kind of went. He's retired. He's having fun in his yachts. He put in Andy Jassy, and Andy Jassy's job is to just margin. They reach a maturity stage where they're trying to get squeeze as much as they can. You see that reflected in a lot of places. So you can't hate the game. You have to participate in it, and you have to make it work for your advantage. And that's what we've been trying to do, and what we're trying to focus on, moving as many units as we are, obviously. So, and that's just the natural phase of every Silicon Valley startup. Netflix, DoorDash, they all started, they're unprofitable, they're trying to turn a profit. They started at low prices, they're raising prices now. So it's funny when people get frustrated at Amazon fees. Like, you'd probably do the same thing if you were in their shoes, right? So it's not like, it's just a natural cycle of businesses nowadays with Silicon Valley and all that kind of business mentality. And also valuations now, even if you're looking for an exit, right? Valuations nowadays are based on margins. A few years ago, early 2020s, COVID crazy peak with aggregators and everything, you've seen some people get multiples on revenue. That almost never happens today, except in a few industries like Poppy, for example. But they're just booming, right? But 99% of e-com businesses or consumer brands are being the multiples, basically whatever, a couple multiples on EBITDA, which is margin, and then plus inventory. So important to keep that in mind. Obviously, there's a lot of famous saying, which is great, like revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, cash is king. Like the CEO of Volkswagen, said that. I think in the one leading in the 90s. But anyways, so, and that's very true. I mean, cash obviously keeps his oxygen for the business, keeping it afloat, but profit is what you're trying to get after and what you should be a north compass for brands. So margin levers. So what's margin? Also known as like EBITDA, also known as net income. I mean, it depends how you use it. It kind of goes back and forth, but basically, it's how much is left over after like whatever you sell. How much is kind of left over, whatever for the costs that have to do with that sale. So there's cost levers, right? And there's revenue levers to impact margin. There's also something that's not as relevant for brand, like a lot of the brands that we partner with. It's more for brands that we doing over $50 million a year that we see and we talk to them about it. But for most of the brands we work with, and something that's tactical and applicable that we're going to get into today, are the cost levers and the revenue levers that have a more direct impact, or they're more relevant for brands doing, I would say, 1 to 20 million, right? And nothing surface level. I want to get deep into tactics, so it's going to be, so just take your notes, take whatever is applicable, and make sure to implement it on your end. So obviously the first thing we have to get into data visibility. Everything else is irrelevant if you don't know where our numbers stand. So that's why also it's very important to kind of know your feet from your legs and kind of see where you stand in the market, what's doing well, what's not doing well, what isn't measured, isn't managed. So there was a study done in I don't know when it was done. I mean, it was a while back, but basically they got two groups and they were measuring their weight, and they did it during the holiday season when everyone gains weight. So they got like a group of 20 people here, 20 people there, and they didn't do anything. All they did is they had one group measure their weight every morning, and the other group didn't. So as they went through this exercise, the group that measured their weight at the end of that week, at the end of that period, was 11 pounds less than the other group. So just by looking at it, they kind of had attention towards it. And once you have attention, you put eyes on something, that alone makes it better. Never mind being proactive about fixing it, right? So let's at least get the first part right. Let's at least see the numbers, get it what it's like. It doesn't have to be fancy. You could put an MVP version, minimum viable product, of just basic high level KPIs and get what's better. Prioritize the biggest levers, so like revenue, cost of goods sold, right? Like, for example, I don't want my team to measure coupon fees when they don't know what, for example, the advertising general PPC spend, sponsored product spend is. Obviously, that's much more significant. So let's get that one in, and let's get the other one in. Measure what you have. You don't have to. Done is better than perfect. So one example is we wanted to measure cost per cubic foot. It's more dimensional weight. We couldn't get it, so we just went to the best next thing, cost per pound. Hopefully, we're going to get to that soon once we finalize some of the stuff in the ERP and data warehouse. But the point is, we wanted to use something in the meantime. It's obviously not here. This is just like high-level company stuff, but it's part of our supply chain KPIs. So also it allows you to obviously replicate good practices and bad practices. Like a lot of the learnings we have in here is because I saw the P&Ls, I saw the data, and then we detected patterns, me and the team. So for example, one simple one, just I'll mention many more later, but we saw that there was a supply chain bump during January. It's like we started connecting the dots. Why does the cost per pound go up so much in that period, right? And then we detected, okay, it's because CNY, Chinese New Year, there's a lot of supply for shipping, so let's try to move it back a few weeks, and that's saving us a lot of money, right? So that's just one example. And then importance of visibility, just doubling down on it. It forces you to be less sloppy. You have to kind of be more strategic and structured. So we went, even the SKUs that we're launching them, we know that there is going to be tracking involved and work to operate them. We're much more organized. We think before we launch a new SKU, okay, we're going to have to track it. Is it worth it? We got much more, you can fit per se. A lot of brands overestimate their bottom line. We talk to so many brands that like think they're operating at like, let's say 16, 17%, or even that's actually on the healthy side. We see some brands that think they're doing like 30 when they're actually doing like honestly 17. And the reason is there's a lot of fees that they just didn't think of or accommodate with just this random tool here and this random agency here and this random tariff cost here and this random shipment here and this random Amazon fees, which is a lot of Amazon stuff that we'll get into later that happens. So one simple one, right? So we have a friend, she's a beauty brand, she's an amazing person, but Amazon, they introduced off Amazon marketing spend, they defaulted everyone to participate in it. So the default one is increased reach. It wasn't the one at the bottom, right? And for her specifically, she was charged 180 grand. Thankfully, she, after yelling for and fighting with Amazon for months, she was able to recoup it. But yes, that's probably more than other ones, but a lot of other people were charged a couple grand without knowing about it and without turning off this feature, and it wasn't getting them the return that they were hoping. So that's something to keep in mind. And also, it gives you an ability to do apples to apples comparisons. So you have a control and you can measure against it. So for example, right now we use AWD. Okay, how much would it cost if we just wanted to use AFB instead of AWD? Because we know what AWD costs, or how much would it cost to store it in the. So one thing that we started doing is storing in the factory in China because that's much cheaper, and we can run cost analysis and know what the before and after was. So that's another example. And one big thing is also inventory, like consolidation in general. So whether it's tools, labor, so we had two people doing the same thing. We doubled down labor, but just a quick example of a tool is we had Helium 10 Jungle Scout. We were paying them a bunch of money because we have a lot of people. So we obviously realized that we didn't need both, so we were able to cut one of them off and save 12 grand there. That's so just another example. And the more granular you get, the better. But again, measure what you have and then try to get granular. And also, once you get that granularity and you get that data, it can advise a lot of strategic decisions. So like marketing budget, supplier negotiations, you can tell your supplier, listen, this is where I stand today. I want to work out something better. What can you work with me on? All that kind of stuff. And make sure you include everything, obviously, as much data as you can. The more the better. But again, work with what you have. So now let's jump into the fun stuff. Let's talk about some of the cost levers. So these are the primary buckets for costs for e-commerce brands, the most significant ones. There's other ones, obviously, that are somewhat related. So for example, I'd consider SaaS, software as a service, part of this. But again, let's just get into these ones primarily. So logistics, procurement, inventory and forecasting, ops and processes. So this is, I would consider also labor as part of this one, obviously a big one here, and then marketing. And then each one obviously has its classification, and we're going to do a deep dive into each one on how to further reduce the expenses that are associated with each bucket, basically, and do a deep dive. So the first one we're going to start with is logistics. So logistics is a huge cost for e-commerce brands. It's moving inventory, whether it's from your manufacturer to your fulfillment center, from fulfillment center to your customer. It's just a huge expense. But what people don't know is it's actually also a huge growth engine. You might sound contradictory, but especially with Amazon, I think one of our employees saw this on LinkedIn, but basically they saw conversion rate was going up, and we did this also matched with our internal studies. We found that it was accurate, is that conversion rate was 20% for same day, but for example, 1 day and 2 day, it was only 16%. So it was around a 20% jump in conversion rate for same day compared to 1 day and 2 day. So that's where a lot of our SKUs, for example, the top 20% of SKUs, we're making sure that there's same day shipping in all 40 states, because that's going to increase conversion rate. And actually, it's going to help us save money. And how does it help us save money? Because our marketing spend is more efficient. So we don't need to spend as many marketing dollars to get the same amount of sales because our conversion rate is higher. So that's just one thing to keep in mind is, let's say you're same day, but your competitor is, you're 2 day, but your competitor is same day. They might go to it even if their product is worth, because they need it today for a birthday party or whatever. So that's a very important factor to also think about like that. Within logistics, there's primarily transportation, supply, and labor to keep in mind, like the employees that are prepping the stuff. Whether if you're using obviously a 3PL, it's a little bit different, but for us, we're doing this in house. We have 3 to 4 warehouses that we're using across the United States. And then density is the most important factor. If you took anything away, it's this, especially for the logistics section of things. And I'll jump into it to the next slide as well. So, and it's very often overlooked. I see some people talking about ads or creative, especially now with the AI craze on creative, but they underlook the basic fundamentals in a huge cost center, which is logistics. So getting into density multiplier, I once posted this on LinkedIn. You can go follow me there if you want. But I kind of got a lot of heat for it. It was controversial, but you can see how dense we have our trucks. And we obviously make sure that we stack them right. Thankfully, we have great product and seller feedback across all of our portfolio. And you obviously have to make sure products arrive damaged, nothing makes a difference. But obviously, we make sure that you can see the density is we're making this truck very dense. We're trying to fit it in. So on a truck level, but also on a product level, we're making it as dense as possible, whether that's the packaging, because the retail packaging and the e-commerce packaging does not have to be the same. You can use the main image, make it your retail packaging, but then the product packaging can be different for e-commerce, and we do that frequently. Obviously, it depends on the branding and if it's a certain positioning, and obviously you want to avoid that, but generally, that we see that frequently, we do that frequently to make sure we're as efficient as possible, compact for e-commerce, because we're moving it so many times. You want to get it as efficient as possible. So fill trucks as much as you can all the way to the brim. So that's why when we're shipping overseas, we're consolidating containers. We're trying to fill it up because it's a fixed cost. We want to spread it across as many units as possible. And that space, they're charging you for space. So they don't care how many units you put in it. So you want to put in as many units as possible. One example is even Amazon, AWD, they charge a processing fee. I think it's $2.16 per box, right? So let's say before one item we had 4 items in a box. Then we moved it to 10 items in a box because we realized, so the box obviously became heavier, but it still was under their 50-pound threshold. So now when we moved it from 4 units to 10 units, that alone, because we had to use AWD for that certain product, that alone saved our partners 30 cents a unit. Right, and that's how we talked about, again, saving on the bottom line, supply chain efficiencies, because now that $2.16, it's 20 cents, it's spread across 10 units, which is 21 cents a unit, versus before it was spread across 4 units, which is around 53 cents a unit. So you can see the savings over there. That's around 30 cents, right? And they were selling around 3,000 of this a month. So 30 cents times 3,000, that's around $1,000 a month. So that's another 12 grand a year. So you can see how these are starting to add up. And then you use that savings to funnel the marketing. You get multiplier effects, basically. Every centimeter inch counts everywhere, especially at the product level. So the more compact and the more dense you can make it, all the way from the product, again, to the packaging, to the container, the more savings that you'll get, and you'll see those trickle down to the bottom line. Another thing you want to do is cutting distance and touch points. So the less people you get involved, the less hands something touch. It's one of the primary principles of like Lean Six Sigma and Kaizen improving processes to limit the touch points and limit the amount of movement. So, for example, one thing that we did is we used to ship from the Chinese or Vietnam factory for some of the products to our warehouse to do quality control, and then ship them to Amazon fulfillment centers. But then there's additional costs. There's our employees here touching the products and inbounding and outbounding in our warehouse. There's a shipping to our warehouse and shipping again to Amazon. So what we did instead is we allocated almost only 20% of those costs to a quality control team in China that we built out that now inspects it over there and sends pictures and it's actually better because they're immediate feedback to the supplier and they also talk to them in person. So that's just one example of quality control and saving costs on that aspect of things. And cutting distance and touch points. So the fewer hands, the shorter distance, the stronger the margin. All right, and then you also want to have a dynamic shipping strategy. I once did a video on this. It's like all around the place, but it just goes into showing how complex it is. Yes, if you're only like $1 million brand that's just Amazon first, a lot of this is not relevant. But as you grow and you want an omni-channel strategy, you have to be very cognizant of your shipping, and you want to be as dynamic as possible. For example, we're shipping products into Canada, right? How can we inbound it as cheap as possible? For certain brands, we have to accommodate that. Another example is, let's say we're using AWD, we can then MCD, multi-channel distribute it if we need products for Target. So we ship products to AWD. Instead of shipping to our warehouse and shipping our warehouse to AWD, it's actually cheaper if we ship to AWD because it's a larger facility, and then we ship what we need, MCD it to our warehouse for Target and Walmart. That's just one example of being dynamic, depending on the product, depending on the brand, depending on all those factors. So you have to make sure that you also rotate through facilities, you rotate all that kind of stuff. So for example, we have a warehouse in Vegas. If it's East Coast, it's obviously going to that one. And just understanding where the products is needed. So like I mentioned earlier, if we don't have a certain SKU that's not same day in the California, Nevada region, then we use that facility to make sure that we spread it in those FCs, so it's same day shipping there. So just making sure that you have a dynamic strategy. Start from where you are. You don't have to be as comprehensive, obviously, as this, but again, it's like levels to it. If you want to start firing in all cylinders, you kind of level up and you go to the more comprehensive solutions for this. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Volume as a margin lever, this is a big one, especially in logistics, but everything. I mean, this is kind of going to be applicable anywhere. You want to dilute your fixed cost across as many units as possible. So, for example, let's just say helium tents, a simple example, everyone knows it, right? They're going to charge you $100 a month. We charge people much more. We have a bigger plan. But anyways, for seats, let's just say it's $100 a month. If you're selling 50 units or 5,000 units, that cost is going to be the same. So if you're increasing the cost, that's an advantage because now the fixed cost of $100 is spread across more units, so it's technically cheaper. But also what you can do is you can use that to negotiate with vendors. So if let's say, for example, we buy boxes to prep items. When we're buying 100 boxes, we had a different price, and now when we're buying 1,000. So we make sure as our volume increases, we're also, especially if we're paying per unit and it's a variable cost, we can use that as a strategy to get cheaper costs on an item. And even just like one example, when we're shipping 8 pallets, it's $1,300, but 10 pallets is $1,500 because now we're shipping a full truckload. And this was just the cost for a pallet that was going to one destination. You can see the per pallet cost went down a lot. Yes, the absolute cost went up, but just understanding that volume is very, very helpful when you're trying to ship stuff. This is just showing the cost per pound go up for these 2 items when we're starting to do more volume. You can see it almost go down. What was this? Almost like 60% or even more, actually. Yeah, 60. Let's just say 60%, because we're leveraging volume for these certain facilities. So that's where you want to make sure you're as effective and potent as possible to leverage the volume that you have. Now let's get into procurement, or also known obviously as cost of goods sold, the exciting stuff. So the first thing you want to do to make your COGS as efficient as possible, you want to do your homework. You want to do the prep work. We kind of mentioned data as a prep work, but there's also prep work here. You all want to list your catalog and the spec sheets on a certain presentation. We had one of our brand managers, we have them do this as an exercise to make sure that we have the current items. We want to make sure that you're comparing competitors, packaging choices, everything is accurate. You're also comparing. So one simple example is we had a water bottle, right? And this was made out of plastic. So we started coating it out, and we like, wow, we got excited. The brand I work with, they got excited. It was like, okay, this is great water bottles. It's much cheaper price. I think it was like 20 or 30% cheaper. But then what it turns out is that this factory was using recycled plastic, which is much less rugged and durable. And then we seen the bad reviews pour in. We were able to thankfully do a correction and kind of work it out. But that's why you have to list on the spec sheet the specific details and all that kind of stuff. So when you're getting quotes, you're getting them accurately for the product that you listed out. You obviously run a quality control to make sure it is actually that product. All those concepts are very, very important to keep in mind. Another example is the boxes that I mentioned earlier. There's something known as ECT. So we need 32 ECT. That's a certain that can contain 50 pounds. If we're getting a quote for 16 ECT and it's 70% cheaper, of course cheaper, but it's not relevant because we need something cheaper at the current grade and specs that we need. And that's why it's important. But it's also the cool thing is once you prep it, you can just throw this deck to vendors to give you quotes back. So it's not like you have to detail it every single time. It's kind of you're doing one-time work and you can leverage it across many vendors to get quotes and get all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like listing requirements and getting quotes. So that's one of the things that I prep and recommends our brands to do as they go through this process. You also do apple-to-apple comparisons, obviously. It's very, very useful process. And then you have to kind of work with your manufacturer on this. Like you have to let them know where you want to be. You have to have them help you figure out how to get things figured out. Like you listen, you tell them, I'm at this current tier of size, or I'm at this current situation. I want you to help me get it to lower. And that's where you can use their expertise. They know the product very well. They've probably been producing it for years on end, but they also have a stake in the game. If they sell you more products, you tell them that, listen, if I sell more, you're going to make more. You get them involved in the process to have them help you figure out some of the problems and leverage it. And you can align on cost transfers. You can tell them like, listen, I need to be there. Tell them where we need to be. And even develop like packaging solutions. So that's where you get them involved in the entire process to make sure that you guys are live on everything and see what everything looks like. Go direct. This is another big thing, is working on procurement COGS. A lot of times you're going to find yourself working with an agent, a sourcing agent, and there could be charging. Like I was just speaking to a friend of mine, and he's doing basically kind of household supplies. And he buys like $30 million worth of inventory a year. But it turns out he was using a trader in the middle. And the trader was charging him around 20 to 25% extra on the actual cost of an item. So you can imagine that 30 million bucks. That means it was around probably $4 million that this middleman was making just for communicating that. So he eventually found out there's a big issue with him. But he ran into big troubles because of that situation and not understanding that he can go direct. That's why you have to scrutinize every single expense and understand what you can break out of it. What does it look like? So that's a very important concept to keep in mind. Leverage relationships, kind of going to them and knowing these factories in person is a big lift and a big help to understand what you can get. So one of our factories, for example, he was based out of Canada. They moved to the U.S., but because we knew this person well, there was a tariff deadline last year, and it was going to go up. I think from Canada to U.S. I think it was like, I forgot what it was, but it was like a 20% spike. It was going to cost $6,000, and the wire payment cutoff date was we couldn't make it. So the guy was like, "Listen, I trust you guys. I know you guys." So he sent it before that date. So that's an indirect benefit of, yeah, we didn't get a cost, but because the guy trusts us, he knew us. All those concepts, we were able to leverage that relationship. So that's just an example of an indirect benefit. But also then you can leverage better prices and you can see them in person. You can tell them your situation. One of the I'll get into negotiation tactics later, so I have an entire slide for that. But this is just a concept that's important. So now let's get into inventory and Amazon fee mitigation. So this is a very important concept, especially with Amazon. Before it was much cheaper, but Amazon, especially the FBA, has gotten very, very serious that we don't want to store, we want to process your inventory. And they've penalized people who do store very aggressively, whether it's Q4 being triple or whether it's the cost going up, whether it's the classification. So you want to make sure that you're on target and you're very serious about the storage discipline. So one of the first things to look at is your KPIs. You want to have 100 days of stock as a target and the 98% in stock rate. So you want to make sure that you have contra metrics. This is one of the things that I like from this book, this gentleman, Andrew Grove. But he basically says that if I only measure days of stock, let's say what the team is going to do is they're going to want to have as little days. So days of stock you want it as low as possible, because the less days of stock you have, the less storage you pay, right? So they're going to try to be at 10 days of stock, but I'm always running out of stock. There's no point in that. On the other hand, if I only measured in stock rate, they're going to be at 100% in stock rate, but then I have 2 years of inventory of everything. So you want to measure both. You want to as high in stock rate as possible, while also as little days of stock as possible, to kind of balance both and make sure you're running as efficiently as possible. Cut losses in inventory, sunk costs fallacy. We see this so much with our guys just not willing to give up on inventory. Just liquidate, get rid of that junk, because you're paying on so many different levels with that kind of stuff. And another important concept is you never want to store in Amazon FB. Almost like, I hate saying the word never, but 99.9% of the time. This is just kind of a breakdown of what it costs to store a pallet per year at different areas. You can see Amazon FBA is 10x almost, or not 10x, it's like 8x what a 3PL would cost. And never mind, if you had your own warehouse and you had empty space, then it would cost incrementally nothing because you're paying for the rent anyways. So that's a very, very important concept to keep in mind. The Amazon fee stack, overlooked fees. So obviously storage, everyone knows the basic storage, but there's much more than that. There's monthly fees, there's long-term fees, there's LTSF, inventory age fees, inbound placement. They introduced this early last year. Something very important to keep in mind. AWD, processing fees are consistently going up. They just raised it this year as well, I think for the West Coast and a few other things. So be careful. Returns and removals, processing fees are often missed. So returns, there's not only the cost of the return, but there's also return processing fees. So it's just crazy. And then marketing fees, you're obviously paying ads. Everyone knows that. But then there's coupons, lightning deals, DSP. It's not just a PPC expense, right? Or what am I paying in ads? There's much more to it. One of the fees to kind of keep in mind is also ships and product packages. This is one of the savings that you can have, and it can shave off a couple, even up to $1.50 on some items. You obviously have to make sure that it outweighs the cons of returns. But also another thing is if a product does come in as a return and it was SIPP, ships and product packaging, you want to be it's basically not going to be sellable because they're going to put the label on the item itself, and the label is not removable. They do that on purpose. So keep that in mind, that returns are pretty much a wash, customer returns. So if you have valuable items that are returned frequently, SIP is just going to eat into that. So keep that in mind as the program goes on. Pilot it, see if you get bad reviews. If the products get damaged on the way, you have to be very careful. Obviously, you have to make sure it's durable, do your testing, but we've been able to save money on a few of our SKUs with this program. Some of the frequent forgotten fees. Storage fees, obviously a triple in Q4. Inventory age surcharge, disposal and liquidation fees. So this is an interesting one. So not only are they giving you like crap for liquidation amount, but they also deduct liquidation fees from it. So usually what we're seeing is you're getting like 10% of cost, but then there's also 10% of that gets charged as a fee. So let's say you're getting $30, they're going to charge a $3 fee, so you're only really going to get $27. Misclassified inventory dimensions, Cubiscan. So we're going to talk about this later as well, but you want to make sure that your items are, you measure your items and you have that in your spec sheet, right? This is where we get into the spec sheet. We have the product dimensions, but we also have the package dimensions. Amazon measures on the package dimensions, and you want to make sure that's reflected on the product itself, and it's there basically. And then reverse logistics. This is a huge cost center. It's basically not just the cost of the item coming back, but everything related to it. So you want to make sure you can implement stuff to incorporate them. Know there's partial return options, like where you can settle basically with the customer, but there's also a support option. So that's something that we're implementing, and it could be relevant and useful. Another thing, reimbursements and recovery. This is a huge one. 4 to 5% of total units we got last year, I think it was 4.2%. So imagine if we sold, let's just say, 1 million units. That means we got back 42,000 units. And I'll get into what that means numbers wise more. You have to measure whether you want to do this in house or use a SaaS to help you with it. There's so many softwares now that help. You want to make sure that you're managing your sourcing costs, so you're basically the amount that Amazon has in mind, it's accurate and appropriate. Cubiscan, customer returns, and comprehensive strategy, basically that you're looking at inbound placement fees, AWD, etc. So there's so many leakages, and I'll get into the example here. So you can see all these different columns. You can pause, zoom in, but these are all the different ones that we're measuring, and each one has its own classification. I also did a video on reimbursements. You can go check that out where I walk through this cheat. But the thing is, you want to make sure, like before, now Amazon automated, I think middle of last year, they automated a lot of the reimbursement process, which is great. But still, that doesn't mean they have everything. I've seen a lot of brands kind of rest on their laurels, thinking everything's handled well, but that's not the case. You still have to, it's much less, but you still have to do work to pursue every single penny. But where a lot of the work now is, it's actually on the managed sourcing cost side of things. So you want to make sure that you're looking at these sourcing costs and you are basically recovering every single penny. So that's where Amazon's going to fight with you. Like, this is $10. You want to make sure that it's actually your landed COGS and includes it. You want to beef it up to include everything as much as you can. The duties, tariffs, shipping. That's what I said, landed costs. Even if you can OPEX, operating expenses. It's kind of the opposite of tariffs. Tariffs, you want to show them the lowest number possible. But for manage your sourcing costs, you want to give them the biggest number possible, because everything is trickled down from there. If they lose 1,000 units, you're going to multiply 1,000 by the sourcing costs that they have in mind. So if you figure that out right and you lock it in, it's kind of going to stick there. So it's a one-time effort that you have to fight with Amazon to get it right. But then every time an item gets damaged, lost, etc., you get it on that dollar amount. So that's where a lot of the work is now. Again, so just to give this as a So last year, let's just say, let's just use 100 million as an easy number. We sold closer to 90, but let's just use 100 million. So we got in reimbursements 2 to 3% of that. So it was 2.1%. So let's just say 100 million, that's $2.1 million in cash reimbursed. Around, yes, 80% of that, maybe 1.5 Amazon automatically reimbursed, but the rest we had to fight for. So that's something to keep in mind. And then but the total units reimbursed between cash and between actual units that they found was closer to 4 to 5% of our total inventory. So you can imagine that if we sold 1 million units, again, just for an easy number, you're talking about 40 to 50,000 units Amazon either paid us for. So half of them they paid us, the 2 to 3%, right? But then the other half, approximately, they found the inventory and gave it back to us. But again, they didn't all give it back to us automatically. We had to pursue them for it. We have our team. We use 3 to 4 softwares, and I made an entire video on this because you can see how significant of an expense this is and how serious it is to pursue it. And so that's where you're categorizing. We reward our team for certain amounts, but it's very important to keep an eye on that. So jumping into operations processes, are like that include also kind of labor employees. So lean labor and productivity. So make sure you, this is where we kind of do a process map for various activities or workflows that are happening in our business from start to finish, and we see what's necessary or what's not. A funny story kind of we remember for this is just going to process maps and things, adding things that are necessary that were added over time but are no longer needed. It reminded me of this funny story. Basically, is there was this girl, and she was cooking a roast pot, and she was using a very small pan, even though it was much larger. But she just used two pans instead. So the her guest asked her, "Why don't you just use two pans?" Like, I don't know. I mean, that's the way I saw my mom doing it. So she went to her mom. She's like, "Why did you use two pans? Why not just use one big one instead?" So they mom said, "I don't know. That's the way I saw my mom doing it." So she went to that girl's original grandma. It's like, "Why do you do it that way?" She's like, "I just couldn't afford a larger pot." So it kind of goes into things that not everything you guys are doing is done right. It's sometimes just born of the moment, or one employee was maybe just they had to work with what they had to work with, and there was original updates. One example is like doubling quality control checks, right? So for the same products that were quality controlling in China, we're quality controlling here. That was obviously unnecessary. So that's where process mapping, you see what your team is doing and what the process is going through. You can move things first. You can see what you can delegate, what you can obviously automate, what you can delete, what you can add AI into. That's why we had a lot of ideas for just adding AI, like even for like copywriting. There's certain, okay, there's a first copywriting draft. We don't need a person to do that. We can just throw it into AI. It can pump it out, and we can have a person do revisions. So because we have a process map, we know where we have to be and what's needed and what's not needed, and we can do like an audit of various processes, whether it's in the warehouse or SEO or all different the processes. And that's where it gets into like labor, and then also AI and automation. So for labor, obviously going offshore outside of the US is a big major save. Another one of the things that we like to do is to centralize in a certain region to get an office there. So for example, for us it's Jordan, where I was raised a lot of my time for 8 years. So we have around 40-50 employees there. It helps with, they're kind of in a similar time zone. If anything's needed, we can easily hire. We have an office there. So that's one advantage. So especially as you're hiring remote, maybe when you're initially starting, it's not as relevant to centralize in a certain region. You can kind of hire a few there. But as you get bigger, you want to kind of think ahead and try to pick a certain country or a certain area and try to double down on it, because you start understanding the culture, the region, the certain, like let's say you need laptops, you can deal with a certain laptop vendor there, right? You don't have to find a new one every time, or a certain gift cards or rewards program that are applicable to that country, right? Or holidays. Upskill existing talents a lot of times cheaper than hiring from scratch. You can use it's famous 131 framework. You can look it up, but that's where you kind of teach them on AI. You can teach them a lot of those investing, where you can see the rewards of it. And then AI integration. Every manager, before we kind of hire for a new role, they have to make a business case why they can't have AI do this position. Obviously, a lot of roles are still very new to AI, so it's not as possible. But we do that exercise. We ensure KPI benchmarks reflect throughput API, like AI increased usage. So let's say, for example, creatives, you used to be able to do one listing a day or one main image, let's say in an hour. Now with AI, that's 3 main images an hour, and we make sure that's a new benchmark, that's a new expectation for our team. Same thing for SEO, same thing for a lot of different functions, but primarily creative and SEO have seen the biggest impact. I've made specific AI videos that you can check out as well, but this is just some of the ways we've been able to cost save, is more production per employee, less focus on basically higher level activities for our team members. That's one of the big focuses of ours. And even Amazon is incorporating this, like their new Amazon Marketing Solutions dashboard, the AMS. You can see they have an Amazon AI videos. And also back to the basics, like don't overlook low cost automation. Automation's been here for a long time. AI kind of, now everything has to be. AI doesn't have to. So for example, we're doing LinkedIn outreach to retailers to kind of get a hold of them. We can use a tool like Dripify. Instead of before we had to use a manual person, add this person. Now we just have them in a sequence, and we reach out to these like retail buyers to see if there's an interest. And we use Zapier to tell us when there's a response. Before we had someone check every 5 minutes, and now we just have automated flags when it happens. And same thing for different processes. If we're sending out RFPs, we can automate bulk send emails and get quotes in bulk as we need some of that stuff. Some of the best practices within the cost levers, and this is a big one, is quarterly audits and RFPs. This is a huge one, whether it's primarily we're doing it in our cost of goods sold and our supply chain transportation expenses, because that's where we've seen the biggest variable. But each shipment, we force our logistics team to get quotes from 3 or 4 people to get the cheapest price. And then, for example, not everything can be done obviously every time, but for the cost of goods sold each year, we do a procurement updates. So like, for example, if we're producing something, we send that spec sheet that I talked about earlier, we send that out again to 3 or 4 more vendors and see what they come back with. And then ideally, we're not changing our factory, we have a relationship with them, we know them, we trust them. We just, if there's an updated price, we do have that as ammo to tell them, like, listen, here's something new, something that I need. Even one of the funny things, like threatening to cancel internet bill, right, is we were paying I think it was Comcast over here, $400 a month, and I was like, listening, I don't need you guys. It turns out I was paying for both warehouses, and they were right next to each other. So that's part of having data visibilities. You can see all these extra costs that some team members just opt into, right? But anyways, so you can see that it was twice. I was canceling it, and I don't think I went over the reason, but I was like, okay, before you cancel, instead of $400 a month, how about you just pay $160? I was like, $160? That's the thing. I was like, no, actually, I don't want it, but now that you said that, I'll cancel my other one. So they moved to 160, and then we have 5 locations, and we reduced it for all of them. The one of the controllers did that. So, anyways, it just shows you that sometimes you just have to negotiate, or you have to play ball to get those cost advantages in the door. So again, jumping into negotiating relentlessly, this is one of my favorite books on negotiating. It's a great book. It teaches you how much of negotiating is truly about. Basically, it's more about emotions than it is about facts and logics. It's much more about emotions than we anticipate a lot of times, especially once you develop the relationship. So one caveat to this book is really important. Is Chris Voss. He was negotiating with terrorists that he didn't care for a long-term relationship with. So he was willing to put everything on the line and risk the relationship because he didn't care about the relationship to extract and squeeze as much as possible. But the issue with that, if you do that to a vendor and they find out that you squeeze them too much, they might agree then, but you might turn that relationship sour and they might cut you off later. So you also want to negotiate well. I think it was in the book, it was Ready, Fire, Aim. But I have it right here. There it is. Yeah. It was Masterson, his name, the author of the book. But basically, he was saying how you kind of want to know what your price is and you want to get to it. So you want to balance. Again, you don't have to implement this book to a lot, because especially if you're dealing with someone, they feel like you're trying to squeeze them and you're trying to milk them. And that's what he does. Obviously, he's negotiating with one-off people, so it's not as relevant. It will give them a sour taste. So they might deal with you then for that instance, but they might leave you for the long term, and they might not lose that trust in you. So you have to be careful, and you want to make sure that you're actually kind of dealing with trust and like kind of being fair, not nickel and diming as well. And leading with transparent data for the most part, like tell them this is where I need to be. Sometimes some people, they kind of take advantage of that insight and they try to squeeze you. So you have to make sure that this is with someone you trust. And always asking what's the next price break tier. So a lot of times for a certain vendor, they have like, okay, if you produce 10,000, that's kind of a way to get like, okay, if you produce 20,000, there's another break here. There's 20 cents extra. But if I'm only going to save, let's say, if there's next price break tier is 11,000, but only save a penny, it's not even worth it, right? So they want you to produce more, they want to sell more, so that's how you can motivate them a lot of the time, the vendors, to get there. So benchmark annually, that's where I said RFPs, you're sending it to numerous vendors and seeing what discounts you can get, and also track trends, negotiate when useful. So for example, in 2022, raw materials for wood went down. One of our products used that a lot. We renegotiated the rates for that. So because we saw that the raw materials went down. So understand the overall macroeconomic scale of things and what's going on overall in the market, in the economy, is obviously helpful. Only to your advantage. So, like another hand, if wood went up, obviously would go to the vendor, you have to raise prices on me because that's their job to do, just like it's my job to do if it went down. So that's kind of the way that our brand managers look at it. So now let's get into Amazon marketing and how you can save within marketing fundamentals. There's so much to go into marketing. I'm going to primarily jump into things that have to do with cost savings or marketing efficiency to get more bang with your buck. It's much more complex than this, especially for bigger brands. You have to think about top of funnel, attribution, but I want to get as much into it as possible. So marketing comes down to maximizing profit per unit of attention, right? So you pay for attention to these media brands, and whether that's top of funnel attention that you can attribute or bottom of funnel, that's pay per click, which a lot of is more relevant for $20 million brands. You're paying for that attention. You want to maximize the profit that you get for it. So which is a conversion. So at the end of the day, you want to these two you want to go down, and if these two go up, you want to go up, and if these two go up, this goes down, right? So that's kind of what it comes down to. You want to increase your conversion rate and your AOV. And I'm going to get into the revenue levers later about increasing AOV, and there's some interesting concepts there. But when you look at, for example, conversion rate, what are the things that improve it? It's obviously a lot of it comes down to the PDP. It's the offer that you're giving. What does your reviews look like? Your ratings look like? There's so many factors in here, but you want to make your offer amazing, as good as possible, where someone comes into your listing, they can't leave, they have to buy basically, and your competitors are nowhere near. Now, is that easy as click as a button? Obviously not. That's what you have to spend the majority of your time on, because you want someone to land in your place, you want them to buy. And if your conversion rate is good, then your ranking improves, it kind of creates that flywheel. But also, it has to do with the in-stock we mentioned, right? Same-day shipping. That's another factor. If they jump in, same-day shipping, they need it today, they're likely to buy. If it's 2-day shipping, or even worse, if it's MF, it's going to be maybe 6-7 days, then it gets very, very tough. One thing to keep in mind is you want to also look at, sometimes you want to value absolute versus relative profit. Like if you invest more in marketing, yes, your relative profit might be less, but your absolute profit went up. So what's more important for you? And that's where margin percentage versus margin dollars. And you have to think about that. So one example is a product. We had around like 15% tacos on it. It was selling like 1,000 units. Each unit was making, I think it was like $10. But then we went up to 20%. It sold 3,000 units, and each unit was making like $7. So we were making more absolute. That's more important for us. We want to move as many units as possible. So we took that investment and we paid for it. The other thing, going back into data, you have to understand where our marketing costs are coming from, which ones to double down on. I'll get into it's going to jump in later on us why should that be. But again, a very important concept is the primary goal of marketing should be organic ranking. This is a great quote. The aim of marketing is to get a customer, not just a sale. And for Amazon version, it's organic ranking, or basically LTV, so recurring purchases or organic ranking, that's what we try to get from our at least short-term goals for our marketing campaigns, is our organic ranking goes up. That's why CVR is so important, because the better your CVR for a certain keyword, it signals to Amazon this is a healthier customer journey, and they reward you for that. Marketing efficiency, there's a lot of so this is where we get into marketing efficiency and using it. Business cases for marketing spend. So you want your team, when they want to establish a marketing, let's say budget or deal or coupon or whatever, they have to have a business case. So that's where, like, okay, we want to run a lightning deal so we can sell 1,000 items so we don't get the inventory age surcharge. And then the finance team approves it. So you want your marketing people to be strategic. And same thing when they're setting up campaigns. Are they going to set up campaigns that have a long-term purpose? All that kind of concept. I mean, marketing expenses along with supply chain and COGS are the three biggest buckets for expenses in e-commerce companies. Marketing expenses actually sometimes wins a lot of times. So the point is, you want to be very diligent about overviewing, and that's where we said like reviewing the highest buckets more frequently, because again, Pareto principles, you want to focus on the things that are driving the biggest needle movers. And that's where marketing is a big needle mover. So you're pruning it frequently. You're having your director of marketing or yourself even just jumping in there, sorting them by campaigns, least to most efficient. If you can direct attribution, if you're not seeing long-term, how does it measure up? They're making the business case. Again, what is it going to bring down to you? You're pruning frequently. Let's reduce here. Let's bring here. You're using strategies like day parting, hourly parting. You're seeing when there's lower conversion. For example, if it's a travel item for, let's say, weekend travel item, let's just say camping, right? Friday night or Thursday, it's going to have high conversion, but maybe Tuesday and Wednesday, people are just kind of shopping the market, seeing what's out there. So, for example, you put less of a marketing budget those days compared to Thursday and Friday. You want to get all the clicks because the conversion rate is higher. So even thinking to that depth of daily parting, hourly parting, campaign parting. So even if there's certain campaigns that are not doing well, you kind of rank them by high spend to see the biggest spenders first and seeing why they're not doing well, all that kind of stuff. We like to review like stuff that has a high A cost, over 40% and over $100 spend. And if it's not a long part of a long-term strategy, then why are we still keeping that alive? Unless we want it to rank for a certain thing or we wanted something specific, then what's the point of having that in there? And you want to try at this stage, especially get out of this sponsored product. Like sponsored product videos are doing really well for us. That's where you're looking at campaign parting and seeing display products. And we didn't even get into obviously using AMC, DSP, but those have sometimes great levers. Again, not as sometime bottom of funnel as we hope, but still it has a long term ramification. So just seeing again the goal, as mentioned earlier, is to maximize profit per unit of attention. And that doesn't have to be today. It could be maximizing profit over a year. So thinking long term and thinking of the impacts on that and what that can do for you. So now getting into revenue levers and some of the things that live within that. So the three big buckets that I'm going to talk about today is increasing LTV, getting more from your customers, whether it's AOV in that instance or over the long run, recurring purchases, upselling, cross-selling, downselling, multi-packs, bundles, channel distribution expansion, so EU, Canada, Target, Walmart, and premium pricing and packaging. So strengthens positioning. This is one of the big things on Amazon to deliver that moat and have some strengths in there. So growing LTV, there's many ways into this. One of the some of the non-obvious ways is basically subscribe and save CAC to LTV testing. So one of the examples we had is we tested a $20 product. We had a 10% coupon on it, and we're getting, so that's 10% coupon, so it's technically $2, right? We were getting 100 subscribers a month, but we changed it to a $2 coupon, and we're getting 150 subscribers per month. So we changed it from 2% to $2 coupon when you subscribe and save. So obviously we kept the dollar amount, and then that's where you're testing what the variance between dollar percentage, even let's say we raise it to 15%, how much do we get? Is it worth it based on the LTV that we're going to get? And how does that look like as a dollar amount? So testing your SNS coupon and seeing what that reflects in. Multi-pack discounts. So once we grew AOV, is basically we did this strategy and it worked really well, as we had non-stackable coupons that work together to drive. Again, you can read this post more specifically, and I made an entire video on this as well, but this is one of the things: business pricing discounts, RFP managed quotes, where Amazon can send you quotes from customers that want to order in bulk. But these are all very cool ways to grow LTVs on Amazon. That, yes, LTV is more maybe relevant for Shopify because you have your customers' data, but there's still ways to do it on Amazon that we focus on a lot, whether it's the AOV directly and creating but we didn't even get into concepts of like using the market basket analysis tool and brand analytics to see other products that you can do, and that's also a very cool tool as well. So that's on growing LTV. It's still something you can do on Amazon. And then another one is channel expansion. This is incremental revenue. This is just one example of a product introduced to Canada. I notated this one specifically because it did more revenue in Canada than it did in the US. We see a lot of pet products do really well there. So that's sometimes between Canada, UK, EU, just Amazon marketplaces. You can see as much revenue from all the international marketplaces as you do on Amazon US between all of them combined, obviously. But even if you just focus on the big ones and the easy ones, because Canada, UK, both still English language, you can see it. And we introduce our partners to a lot of those. They see usually a 10 to 25% revenue lift. And then you're also adding Target, Walmart, certain categories do really well there. We had a product that is doing $0 there, but now it's doing $2,000 to $3,000 a week on Target because of, again, the certain customer avatar was looking at that place. Also, another good advantage: CPCs are cheaper there, cost per click, there's less competition, and again, these ones don't take as much effort, so they're low hanging fruit. So a lot of these are micro wins at scale. So yes, some of them might not be like gonna grow your bottom line by double overnight, but you add them, and it's not one silver bullet; it's 1,000 golden BBs. I like Howard Schultz in his book. He's like, what's the one thing people ask him, like, what's the one thing you did to transform Starbucks and make it so profitable? He's like, it's never one thing. It's a lot of small changes. So he talks about changing, for example, the straw. He talks about changing the cup, making a better customer experience. He talks about training for the baristas or whatever, right? So that's the same thing here. Is you add a lot of these concepts, you see which ones are most relevant for you, and you implement them. So just some examples is taking packaging size, saves us $6 per unit, and then you multiply the amount of units. So reclassification error that we talked about. Where to start? Basically, data visibility. If you don't have that, obviously that's going to be the most important thing. Do look at numbers with high leverage. So again, COGS, supply chain, marketing are the biggest ones. So double down on those. See what expenses are leaking there. See which one of these concepts resonated the most. You feel like you have the biggest leakage. Prioritize that. Jump on to the next thing. One thing at a time. Done is better than perfect. And don't be discouraged. Sometimes you might not see results immediately, but you might see them, for example, a year from now. Like one example is we were tracking non-Amazon revenue, and it's always been a goal to get to like 200,000. And for like 3 quarters straight, we didn't hit the goal. We hit like 60% of it. And then last quarter I was looking, and it was week 8, and I stopped looking at it because I gave up, and I was like, whoa, we're at the $250,000 and we're at week 8. I was like, so the team, they were joking, like, maybe we should stop focusing on goals, and that way they'll happen, or stop pressuring on us. But what happened is a lot of the works that we did in the quarters before finally funneled into it. So that's what you'll see here. You do the spec sheet, the RFPs, you might take a year to get another vendor, but then next year you see there's no prices and there's no profits and there's no impacts. So some of these take a long time to be implemented and to be useful. So I hope that was helpful. Obviously, make sure to follow on LinkedIn and YouTube, and subscribe to our newsletter to get more of these insights. If you want to partner with us to grow your brand and to make it more profitable, come check us out at Voadera.com. After finishing recording this, I actually made a checklist for a few brand owners, my friends. They really found this really useful, and they wanted kind of a checklist to go over. So I'll make sure to say how to get access to that at the end, and you can basically implement this quickly to your brand and grow your margins immediately just with this very practice.